27-year-old maintenance man Armando Caballero entered Mia Mercano, a 19-year-old girl's apartment, using a master key. There was no reported reason that he needed to go in there.
He had demonstrated a romantic interest in Mia. This was repeatedly rebuffed by Mia.
He went in 30 minutes before Mia got off work on September 24th, the last Friday, and Mia was last spotted that same day, 30 minutes later at 5 p.m. at the apartment. That's the last time she's been seen ever since. Armando was named the #1 person of interest for her disappearance, but unfortunately, 3 days later, on Monday, his body was discovered and he took his own life. There have been massive search efforts for Mia. If you have any information, please contact authorities and I will keep you updated on the story.
This is the most demonic case I have ever heard yet. In Woodstock, Illinois in 2009, Kyle Morgan lured a homeless man into his home, promising him food, shelter, and something to drink. A few weeks go by and the maintenance of the apartment complex were called to the unit as there was a foul odor coming from it. The scene in the apartment was horrific and police discovered the homeless man who had been struck multiple times. He also had 666 written on his forehead. On the walls in the apartment were satanic writings and the blood of the victim. Thankfully, Kyle was found a few states away. However, it was during a police chase and he ended up hitting 2 people in the process. Surprisingly, he actually pleaded guilty. However, he claimed that he was mentally ill, so he only received 30 years in prison.
We need to talk about this photo. This photo was discovered by a single mother who recently bought a new phone. She came home, placed her phone on the table, and started watching TV. But soon after that, her son found the phone and asked to play with it. She agreed, thinking nothing unusual was gonna happen. But around 11 p.m. that same night, the mother decided it was time to go to bed. Strangely though, she found her son already in bed, which was very unusual for him. Normally, he'd want to stay up a lot longer. That's when she noticed her new phone was still in her son's hands. So she took it from him and unlocked the phone, at first only seeing some minor changes. He changed the background on her phone and took a few pictures around the house, nothing too alarming. But since the photos seemed random, she started deleting them, until she saw something that shocked her. This was the last photo on her camera roll, showing her son sleeping, but the photo was taken by someone else above him. Follow for more stories.
33-year-old Saul Murray lost his life in a horrifying act of violence, orchestrated by a group of individuals driven by greed. It all began when Mr. Murray innocently shared images of his Rolex watches on Instagram. Little did he know that Surpreet Dillon, a 36-year-old woman, would come across these photos and be consumed by the allure of wealth. Surpreet reached out to Mr. Murray, initiating a series of conversations that eventually led to a meeting at his flat in Luton. Unbeknownst to Mr. Murray, this encounter was carefully planned. On that fateful night, Surpreet arrived at his residence accompanied by Temidayo Awe, a 21-year-old woman. Together, they drugged Mr. Murray with GHB, rendering him defenseless. The shocking CCTV footage captured the 2 women entering his flat, with one of them propping open the door as the other left temporarily. Later, 2 men, Cleon Brown and Ikem Afia, joined Surpreet and Temidayo, and they departed together, leaving Mr. Murray gravely injured. Tragically, Mr. Murray was discovered lifeless by emergency services the following morning. A post-mortem examination revealed that he had succumbed to a fatal knife wound, his life cut short due to excessive blood loss. The investigation unfolded with the aid of extensive CCTV footage and meticulous phone analysis. Detectives were able to identify the culprits involved in this heinous crime, ultimately leading to the arrest and subsequent conviction of Surpreet Dillon, Temidayo Awe, Cleon Brown, and Ikem Afia. The court heard evidence of their intent to rob Mr. Murray and their willingness to employ force, threats, and the sedative GHB to achieve their malicious goals. This chilling tale of betrayal and callousness serves as a somber reminder of the darkness that can reside within some individuals.
The killer clown comes every few hours to make sure I don't escape the clown prison. I can't even escape at the top as my best friend is guarding it to make sure I can't leave. I don't have anyone to help me anymore as my best friend is being controlled by the clowns. I need someone to save me.
Jordan Turpin has lived through hell and back, and now she's using TikTok to connect with her fans. Let's talk about her story and how she's finally living life on her own terms. If you don't know who Jordan is, she's one of the 13 children from Louise and David Turpin. These parents were terrible to these kids. They shackled the children to the beds, they beat them, and pretty much any bad thing a parent can do to their children, they did it. Needless to say, Jordan had a very traumatic childhood, but she was able to escape in 2018 by running away and using an old cell phone to call the police. By the time she was rescued, she was very malnourished and she didn't know the definition of basic words like medication. After she escaped, she went into foster care where she was then yet again abused by the foster parents. However, when she was in foster care, that's when she decided to create her first TikTok account. As you can imagine, she didn't have much exposure to the outside world when she was living with her parents, but from the very few times she was able to slip away and watch TV, she became obsessed with Justin Bieber. And it seems as though she's just naturally social media savvy. And because she understood the power of social media, she decided to go on Diane Sawyer with her sister. After this, the Turpin story went pretty viral, and that's why many people in the US have heard of it today. She innately understands social media, and just by posting videos every few days, she's been able to get to close to 1 million followers. She's now been signed to talent, PR, and modeling agencies. It seems as though the people who were eager to sign her deeply understand the power of what she's been through and how that story can change the world. The general public is on this bandwagon too. If you look at all the comments on these videos, it's just everyone's her cheerleader and they're so happy to see her posting really anything. I predict that in the next 2 years, she's going to come out with either a memoir or a Netflix show or some streaming show that's about her life. I will definitely be tuning in for either of them.
On January 7, 2022, Alexis Avila was caught on camera throwing her newborn baby boy in a dumpster during freezing temperatures. The baby was left in the freezing cold for at least 6 hours before being found by people looking through the dumpster. The baby survived the ordeal and is now in the care of the father, who says he was unaware that Alexis was pregnant. Alexis allegedly confessed to investigators that she had given birth to the baby and tossed him in a dumpster hours later. Alexis told officers she panicked after giving birth just 1 day after finding out she was pregnant, and said she cut the umbilical cord, wrapped her baby in the dirty towel, and put him in a trash bag. Alexis told investigators she then drove around for a while before deciding to put the baby in a dumpster. When asked what she thought would happen to her baby after she left him in the dumpster, the police chief said she remained silent and could not answer. Alexis was arrested and charged with attempted murder and felony child abuse on January 8, 2022. She was arraigned on January 12, 2022 and pled not guilty. Alexis was released on bond and remains on house arrest as her trial proceeds.
Last month, 7 children were found malnourished and living in horrible conditions in Sellersville, Pennsylvania. On April 23rd, around 1:30 p.m., Penn Ridge Regional Police responded to a call of 2 young girls going inside an abandoned trailer. When police got to the abandoned trailer, a 12-year-old girl was standing outside and police began to speak with her. She told police that her parents told her not to go to the trailer and that they shouldn't be held responsible, and that the only reason why she went there was because she wanted to get a blanket to keep her rats warm because her parents didn't have any money. Then her 14-year-old sister came from the back of the trailer, and when the police saw the condition of the clothes that these girls were wearing, they decided to call their parents, and they did return home within half an hour. Once the parents arrived home, they allowed the police officers to go inside and look at the house, and one of the things that the police officers noticed was that the refrigerator was sealed with a bicycle lock. The key was in the mother Crystal's purse, and when she opened it, there was barely any food. Then she said that she kept it locked because the children would steal food, and she called them garbage disposals with legs. Then the father Shane called out another daughter, and she appeared as the other girls, dirty and neglected. After seeing this, the police decided to file a report with Buck County Children and Youth Social Services to put the children into protective custody, so they left to do that and returned around 5 p.m. where they found 4 more children that were hiding in the back room of the house. The father Shane told police that he lied about how many children he had because he didn't want to get in trouble. Altogether, there were 6 daughters and 1 son, and their ages ranged from 4 to 16 years old. The children were taken to Grandview Hospital to be examined, where it was found that 6 out of the 7 were clinically malnourished. But sadly, it gets worse. The 8-year-old and the 4-year-old tested positive for COVID. The oldest and the youngest had low kidney function, and 3 of them had fevers and were later diagnosed with acute viral syndrome. On top of this, the 6-year-old boy had an abscess in his mouth, and 2 of them needed extensive dental work. One of the children also had ringworm, and 2 of the children had to get their heads shaved because of extreme matting, and one of those girls had maggots in her hair as well. 4 of the children have speech impediments, and it was found that after the initial examination that none of the children have ever attended school. And since the children have been placed in foster care. Now back at the house, in the parents' bedroom, they found 2 dogs, 2 turtles, 2 rabbits, snakes, toads, and a tegu, all in cages. In a separate bedroom, they found about 2 dozen rats in 2 different cages, and another bedroom was blocked off by a broken washing machine. In the house, there were no cleaning supplies, soap, or toothpaste, and there was trash, dirt, feces, and bugs all over the floor. And in the affidavit, the only food that was notable was food for the animals. Shane and Crystal Robertson were arrested on May 19th and were both charged with 1 count of second-degree endangering the welfare of a child and 6 counts of third-degree endangering the welfare of a child. Their bonds were each set for $10,000, and both of them paid it and were both out the next day. And as of right now, their preliminary hearings are scheduled for August 7th.
Feeling like a little kid, and I'm still standing after all this time.
Federal authorities just exposed a black market human body parts ring, and so far 7 people have been indicted on numerous charges. And one of those people at the top was Cedric Lodge, the manager of Harvard Medical School's morgue since the 90s. He allegedly stole parts from donated cadavers before they could be cremated and then sold them for a bunch of money. His wife has been indicted as well, and they allegedly took some of those parts home before shipping them out to buyers in other states. Lodge is also accused of letting some buyers into the morgue so they could pick out which parts they wanted. One of those alleged buyers is Katrina McLean. She owns a store called Cat's Creepy Creations. In October of 2020, she bought 2 dissected faces from Harvard's morgue for $600. And from 2018 to 2020, she transferred over $37,000 to Cedric Lodge. Earlier this month, Candace Scott of Little Rock, Arkansas was indicted on similar charges. Candace worked for a mortuary and her job was to transport, cremate, and embalm remains. Instead of cremating all the remains, she was allegedly selling some of them. In October of 2021, she approached Jeremy Pauley in an Oddities Facebook group. In her first message, she wrote, quote, "Just out of curiosity, would you know anyone in the market for a fully intact embalmed brain?" Over the next 9 months, she sold Polly fetuses, brains, hearts, lungs, genitalia, large pieces of skin, and other body parts. And she collected nearly $11,000 in PayPal transfers. At one point, she allegedly stole the corpses of 2 stillborn babies that were supposed to be cremated and returned to their families.
This girl took somebody's life just for fun. So the girl in this photo is named Alyssa Bustamante, and she had a pretty rough childhood growing up. Both of her parents ended up going to jail, so custody of her was given to her grandparents. After custody was given to her grandparents, her life changed for the better. She was said to have been in a much more stable environment. She was going to church, she wrote poetry. She overall just seemed like a normal kid. But as Alyssa was getting older, she started experimenting with her look and went into this emo kid phase, and unfortunately in 2007, she tried to take her own life. She would then spend the next 10 days in a mental institution, and she was also prescribed medication, but no matter how much she took, she still had a lot of depressive thoughts, and she would even mutilate herself. So after this happened, she really did try to portray a very positive persona in public and even in front of her grandparents, but when it came to her personality behind the scenes and online, she was said to have been a completely different person. She was pretty active on Twitter and would constantly express her hatred towards authority and her joy in unaliving people. She also had a YouTube channel where she ended up uploading a video where she tried to convince her 2 younger brothers to touch an electric fence. And on October 21st, 2009, things took a very dark turn. This is Elizabeth Olton, and she was just 9 years old, and she was actually a neighbor of Alyssa's. She was said to have lived just 4 doors down. She would regularly go over to Alyssa's home to play with Alyssa and her 2 younger brothers, and on that particular night, she was said to have asked her mother for permission to go over to Alyssa's house. Her mom says okay, but also tells her to be home by 5 p.m. And then when 6 o'clock came around and her daughter Elizabeth still wasn't home, that's when she got worried and called the police. Police obviously interrogate Alyssa about what happened, and she tells them that she had nothing to do with it. She had no idea what was going on. Police search the house, and in the backyard, they discover what seem to be dug-up plots, but Alyssa just tells them that she likes to dig holes for fun. And police search her bedroom, and they discover her journal entries, and one particular journal entry was very disturbing. Essentially, it detailed exactly what she did to Elizabeth, and police would later discover Elizabeth's body buried in one of the holes in Alyssa's backyard. The journal entry basically described how she brutally unalived Elizabeth, and then also went on to say how it was a sensational experience. She went on to say that it was rather entertaining, and after it was done, she said that she had to go to church. How ironic. Eventually, she would tell the court what happened, and the court decided that they would try her as an adult. And a few weeks before her trial was set to start, Alyssa was said to have agreed to a plea bargain which gave her 30 years sentence instead of the death penalty.
This man allegedly sexually assaulted his own daughter and murdered his own son, and he's literally getting away with it. Hello, true crimers. This is the case of the Solomon family. This is just my concise recap of the case. Click the comment if you want to see a longer version. But there is a time crunch to this story. Grant and Gracie Solomon were born to Angie and Aaron Solomon. They lived in the Franklin, Tennessee area. Aaron Solomon was a former news anchor in Nashville, Tennessee. Aaron's also a piece of crap. He emotionally, physically, and sexually abused all 3 members of his family. Domestic abuse calls were made to the house often. In 2013, Aaron and Angie were going through a divorce. But Aaron here, he decided to basically kidnap both kids and take them across state lines to North Carolina. When he did that, when Gracie was about 11 years old, he sexually assaulted her in their hotel room. She has proof there was a sexual assault kit, but the authorities are doing nothing about it. Both kids attended Grace Christian Academy School. It's part of Grace Christian Church there in Tennessee. Both of them tried telling the school about the abuse, but the school was like, no, we're going to ignore it. And the church ignored it too. So Grant's plan, when he turned 18, he was going to go to the authorities and tell them everything. It's believed he told his father Aaron that he was planning to do that. On July 20th, 2020, Aaron Solomon calls police to say that his son is pinned underneath a truck. The truck had somehow rolled down this hill and dragged Grant down the hill with him. When he called 911, he said there were 3 people there helping him, but when EMS arrived, there were no 3 people there. And all the witnesses said those 3 people were never there. So Aaron lied. The only significant injuries that Grant had to his body were to the back of his head where he had blunt force trauma. There was a bloody rock next to the truck. His glasses were placed neatly on the grass. The truck was piping hot because they had just driven an hour, but there were no burn marks, no drag marks to Grant's body, no grass stains on the clothing. His body was also in the opposite direction that it should have been. Aaron said he was pinned underneath the truck, but he wasn't. He was just lying in between the front tires. Even an untrained person can say, yeah, this was a staged scene. This was probably a murder. Franklin PD, however, no, it was an accident, we believe Aaron. Aaron refused an autopsy. He refused to let the truck be forensically analyzed. He then sold the truck. And basically now he's on the run. No one really knows where he is. However, Grace Christian Church and the political higher-ups in Tennessee, they are protecting Aaron. They won't arrest him. They won't prosecute him. Despite Gracie going on YouTube and giving a very detailed account of her assault. The statute of limitations on her sexual assault is up this August of 2023. And it's believed that the authorities in Tennessee are just going to let that roll on by. So Gracie won't get justice. We can't let that happen. There's no statute of limitations on murder, however. These people can help open an investigation. We need Grant and Gracie's story to go viral because they're letting a man get away with sexual assault and murder. That cannot happen.
Do you think that you could live with a corpse for 9 days and not notice? That is the question in the case of Paulette Garcia. Paulette was born with both mental and physical handicaps, and it's actually a miracle that she survived her birth. Paulette was born to wealthy parents who lived just outside Mexico City. It was this money and influence that helped her parents spread word of their missing 5-year-old in 2010. On the night of March 21st, 2010, their live-in nannies tucked in Paulette into her bed exactly like this, and the next morning they found the bed perfectly made with no Paulette. There were no signs of forced entry in the Garcia home, and her mom, dad, and older sister hadn't noticed anything amiss that night. They also owned several yappy dogs and none of them had made a sound. Yet somehow Paulette had vanished. The police searched the house and didn't find any clues, and Paulette's mom does several interviews with reporters in Paulette's room sitting on her bed, which is right here in this photo. 9 days later, though, the police notice a foul smell coming from Paulette's bed, and they take all of the covers off, and they find Paulette pinned between her mattress and the foot of her bed frame. I'm obscuring her body with my head, but you could see how close she was this entire time, yet nobody, including the police and the family, smelled her or noticed that there was an odd lump in the covers. Many people find it difficult to believe that her parents wouldn't notice that something was off in 9 days, and her mom had also had some pretty suspicious behavior in the first days of Paulette's disappearance. She was overheard saying, "Even if Paulette dies, I have another daughter," and she also said maybe she was kidnapped by Harry Potter. Not very helpful. Her death was officially ruled an accident by asphyxia, saying that when she was tucked in, she rolled down to the bottom of her bed where she got pinned between the mattress under the covers and then suffocated. Because it's so unbelievable that a body could be sitting there for 9 days undiscovered, people think that maybe her parents had killed her in an act of rage or abuse because Paulette did have developmental problems that made her require a little extra help than most 5-year-olds would. People think that her parents maybe hid the body for 9 days and then returned it. Paulette's nannies were actually the ones who spent the most time with her because her mom worked a lot, and also it did come out that she was having an affair. Her parents have since divorced. There have been no charges pressed in Paulette's case, and this has caused outrage across the country of Mexico. In fact, the police chief at the time had to later resign because it got so bad. Be careful looking this case up because there are very graphic photos and videos online showing her body.
They locked me up.
You're the sheriff in your county.
They booked me there, and then they took me to adjacent county.
What is the fucking staff doing? They got to be walking around going
they were.
Holy
I go to court hearing the next day. They give me $150,000 bond. I bond out, and this is a time of re-election. I keep rolling. I keep rocking and rolling.
Can you believe what my?
And that's what I did. So I got out. I continued to do debates. I did great in the debates. And people would bring stuff up, and I knew how to sidestep it. I was a manipulator, you know? I mean, I was a drug addict, so I knew how to manipulate everything. I was a con man. People were supporting me.
Could you imagine? You get picked up, and like 2 days later, you're in your jail cell, and the guard comes by and says, "You won."
Have you guys heard this horrific story? I'm going to give you a trigger warning now. It is awful. 20 years old, Jessica Ross, Travian Taylor, expecting their first baby. She goes into the hospital in labor, and what you read up there, that's what happened to her baby. Before I show the video of the attorney discussing it, I'm going to give you a trigger warning again, because it's awful. It's just awful.
Let me just tell you very briefly, let me just tell you all about what happened, okay? On July the 9th, 2023, just a few weeks ago, Jessica and Travion, they were excited. She was 37 weeks pregnant at that time, and they were really, really looking forward to the delivery of their firstborn child. Her water broke at about 10 o'clock in the morning on the 9th. Appropriately, she went over to labor and delivery over the Southern Regional. They admitted her and put her on an IV and gave her some medicine to basically progress the delivery. She labored for about 10 hours, and then probably around 10, or strike that, about 8:40 in the evening, she was fully dilated, and they told her to start pushing. Well, during the course of the pushing, the baby stopped descending. There's something called a shoulder dystocia, fancy word for saying that the baby's shoulders could not fit through the pelvic girdle. It got stuck by the bone there in the pelvic girdle. That was recognized, and what wound up happening after that is just brutal. Dr. St. Julian came in, and she, in the process of trying to deliver this baby, pulled on the baby's head and neck so hard and manipulated them so hard that the bones in the baby's skull, face, and neck were broken. When Dr. St. Julian finally took Miss Ross to the operating room for a C-section, cesarean section, where they cut the belly and deliver the baby through the abdomen, when the womb was opened, the feet came out, the body came out, and there was no head. The head was stuck in the vagina, and the head subsequently was delivered vaginally. The baby had been decapitated. Dr. St. Julian was grossly negligent for applying ridiculously excessive force on the baby's head and neck. Dr. St. Julian and the nurses at Southern Regional Medical Center, they were grossly negligent for not getting the help of the on-site in-hospital OB in a timely manner. They have a hospitalist obstetrician who's there on site. And when doctors have problems with delivery, the first thing you do is call them and you get help. You get another perspective, another angle. This was not done in a timely manner, negligently. And then also, the nurses at Southern Regional Medical Center were grossly negligent for failing to advocate and insist in other capacities that Ms. Ross got a C-section quicker, sooner, in a more timely manner. So those are the allegations that we claim in this suit. We just filed it. We're going to be very, very aggressive with the discovery. We're going to put all of these people who were in the room under oath and find out what they have to say specifically about what happened that tragic, tragic evening.
I pray to God this woman wins that lawsuit and everything else. And if you believe in the power of prayer, please send up as many as you can for this family, because as a mother, you know, you go through 9 months of carrying the baby and feeling the baby kick, and you develop that bond and you're so excited. Like, today's the day we're having our baby. And for something like that to happen, I can't even imagine. Pray for this family.